Hello, welcome to Codex Lee. My name is Lee and this is a channel all about books. It's been a while. I haven't recorded a video for like nearly a month. The reason why I haven't recorded a video for quite a while is the same reason why I haven't actually read that much in recent weeks, which is because my dad passed away in the middle of September. It was very unexpected, it was very sudden, and I had to fly back to the UK. I live in New Zealand, and my family live in South Wales in the UK, so I had to fly back to attend the funeral and be with my family, and obviously with the shock of that occurring, I didn't read a huge amount. Despite the circumstances, the reading will go on, and I want to continue with this channel. I want to continue putting out content every week if I can. So here I am again. I participated in the MONSTERathon in September. My intention was to read 10 books for the 10 prompts, but let's talk about what I did read. One of the books I've read was Shakespeare's complete works. I don't have a copy here because it's really heavy and I can't be bothered to lift it up again, but I'll put something up there so you can see the cover. I did do an entire separate video on this where I talked about the experience of reading lots of Shakespeare in a week. Well, technically it was 8 days, and the intention was to read the entire works, to read all 38 plays in this edition, plus the sonnets and all the other poems as well. And as you'll see in that video, I didn't manage to do all that, but I did read 23 plays, and they were mostly the ones I hadn't read before. So by the end of those 8 days, I had actually read all of Shakespeare's works, just not within that week, if you get what I mean. So what else to read for the MONSTERathon? Well, I started the month by reading Different Seasons by Stephen King. So this is a collection of 4 novellas by Stephen King, and this is quite a famous collection because all but one of the novellas in this collection have been made into quite famous films, especially 2 of them. So The Shawshank Redemption was one of the films, which is an adaptation of Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. It's the first novella. It is genuinely a novella, as in it's about 100 pages long. Not every quote-unquote novella in this collection is actually a novella. The second novella, Apt Pupil, is actually quite lengthy. It's a good sort of 200 pages, I think, which to me is more like a novel, verging on a novel. So The Shawshank Redemption I really enjoyed, but if you've seen the film, then I don't know if the novella really gives you much more. And what the film does is it takes certain episodes, it kind of combines some different characters. So like in the novella, there's not a single warden, there are several different wardens throughout the time that Andy's in prison, whereas in the film there's one warden, so it kind of simplifies the text a little bit in the film. The film is one of those rare instances of it is better than the book, even though the book in this case is perfectly fine, it's perfectly enjoyable, but I just feel like, you know, the writing and the performance of that film just really elevates this text beyond what it is. Apt Pupil, like I said, is the second one. It is the worst. In my view, Apt Pupil is one of the worst Stephen King books that I've read. I didn't enjoy it at all. It's really, it's nasty, it's exploitative, it's somewhat predictable, and it's way too long. Even though it's 200 pages, it's way too long. It's just nasty. This was made into a film. I haven't seen the adaptation of Apt Pupil. It was a film made by Bryan Singer, I think in the 1990s, and it's quite notorious because apparently it includes a shower scene involving a teenage boy, which isn't included in the book, and there have been some allegations made against Bryan Singer in recent years that make your skin crawl when you hear about that particular scene, and the fact that the teenage boy who featured in that scene didn't feel as though he really gave consent for that, and they had to refilm it. Nasty book, nasty sounding film. I wouldn't recommend it. The Body is the third novella, which was adapted into Stand By Me, a very famous film starring River Phoenix. It was okay. I actually rewatched Stand By Me recently, and I enjoyed it less than first time around. I think I saw it as a teenager or maybe in my 20s, and I thought it was great. I rewatched it recently and it kind of got on my nerves a bit. I didn't really like the characters that much. I just found them a little bit irritating, and I found them quite irritating in the book as well. The book and the film are quite similar. They follow a fairly similar trajectory. It's okay. It's okay. It just, I don't know. I feel like Stephen King is sort of warming up for It with the body, because there are similarities between these two groups of losers, if you like, who are having to kind of go on this quest. He does that much more successfully in It. And then the final story is called The Breathing Method, which I quite enjoyed. This hasn't been made into a film. I think it would be quite a shocking film. There's a sequence, like a moment at the end of the story that is quite visually quite disturbing. And I actually enjoyed the latter part of this story less than I did the beginning. I quite like the beginning, where there's this sort of like, almost like a gentleman's club, and there's a sort of a mystery surrounding its purpose and how you join and so on, that I was quite intrigued by. But then it kind of shifts gear, and there's this kind of this story that's told that I think is still kind of interesting. There's an interesting dynamic between a doctor and a patient, but I don't know if it entirely held together. So overall, this is, it's an enjoyable collection. It's I enjoyed it less than Night Shift, which is Stephen King's collection of short stories that came out early in his career. Overall, I give this 3 stars, and I would recommend it, particularly if you like Stephen King. If you're not too bothered about Stephen King, then I probably wouldn't read this one. So the other book that I read for the Monsterathon was Roald Dahl's book of short stories. This is quite shiny because I think it's like an ex-library copy. It's still quite a nice copy. It's a big picture of Roald Dahl's face on the cover. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed this. I give this 4 stars. There's a weird introduction by Roald Dahl in this. So this isn't actually ghost stories written by Roald Dahl. These are ghost stories he's collected together into this edition written by other people. And in the introduction he talks about the background to this collection. He had an idea to create a TV show in the 1950s. I think it was 1957, 1958. And each episode was going to be a different adaptation of a different ghost story. And he gathered together hundreds, I think it was over 700 ghost stories that he read, in order to pick the best of them. And there were very few that he actually liked. He was very, very picky. And in the end, he managed to find sort of 24 of them for an entire season of these things. And they did actually film a pilot episode, but apparently it didn't do very well. But given that he'd done all this research and read all these ghost stories, he put 14 of those stories that he'd previously read into this collection. Like I said, so in the introduction he talks about this, and he has this kind of weird rambling section in the latter half of the introduction where he basically says women are really good at writing ghost stories, to his surprise, and they're really good at writing children's stories, but they can't really write much else. Like real literature, is not something that women are very good at. So anyway, you get past that kind of weird introduction, and the collection itself is fantastic. There's some really good stories in here. So if I'm just kind of looking through the contents, I was quite excited to begin with. There's a short story by Edith Wharton called Afterward, and I had recently read The Age of Innocence, and I included that in my previous wrap-up, which I loved. So I was excited about this, and I quite enjoyed Afterward, but the ones that were early in this collection I really liked. WS, which is about this writer who's receiving these mysterious postcards from somebody in the north of the country, who's travelling, and as they're travelling they're sending these kind of weird postcards. It's a bit of a mystery to it that I think is really cool. Harry by Rosemary Timperley is probably my favourite one from this collection, which is about this couple who adopt this child called Harry, and he has an imaginary friend, and there's something a bit off about this imaginary friend. Yeah, there's some other ones that didn't do that much for me, like The Telephone by Mary Treadgold. Ringing the Changes by Robert Eichmann has a lot of really interesting atmosphere, but it doesn't really go anywhere. But like even the ones that aren't so good in this, they're still so well written and have a great sense of atmosphere that even if they don't have that kind of mystery or shock value, they're still really enjoyable. So anyway, really, really good. I gave this 4 stars, and it's a wonderful introduction to ghost stories. They were primarily written in the sort of, I think, from the sort of late 19th to early to mid 20th century. And then the 4th and final book that I read in September, it's Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. So this is about the death of Abraham Lincoln's son. I think his name is Willie. And the whole thing happens over the course of one day. So following Willie's death, we then enter this world of ghosts, essentially, in the cemetery where Willie's buried, and Willie is one of these ghosts, and they don't appear to know that they're dead. They talk about their coffins as sick boxes, and they believe that they're kind of just there to recover. And they're having conversations among themselves, and they're all, you know, different people from different eras, and Lincoln is actually returns to the cemetery to visit his son's corpse and to hold the corpse, which apparently is something that did happen. There are accounts of him actually returning to hold his son's corpse shortly after he was buried, and this has an effect, a bit like a ripple effect on the rest of the spirits there. It's a curious book. A friend of mine lent this to me, and I think she described it as a book of magical realism, which I guess is sort of true. It reminded me a little bit of, actually, talking about Neil Gaiman, of Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. The Graveyard Book is, I guess, written for a younger audience. This is more of an experimental work of literature, because it isn't like a traditional narrative. It's actually, it splits between, on the one hand, extracts from real and made-up historical accounts from the time, sort of describing the party that the Lincolns are holding on the night that their son is dying, and how people feel about the fact that they're having this party and their son is dying upstairs. And then on the other hand, you have almost like a dialogue, really, like a script in a way, that is populated by the voices of these spirits. There's no narrator. It's an interesting approach, and it got me thinking that it's a very original way to approach this subject. I don't know how well it worked for me with this. Like, if I was going to read a book about spirits in a cemetery and the kind of adventures, if you like, that they go on, and the sort of the dilemmas they have to face, the Graveyard Book is much more enjoyable, even though it's written for a very different type of audience. I give this 3 stars because I didn't not enjoy it, but I was pleased to be done with it, because there's not a huge amount of story, and you do get a little tired of some of these characters. Like, some of the characters are more interesting than others. There's a huge cast of characters, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them, and by the end you feel a little bit exhausted, really. Maybe that's kind of the desired effect, I don't know. So, I don't know, would I recommend it? I don't know, it depends what you like, I guess. But yeah, it was okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with me. Sorry it's been such a long time since I've recorded a video, and I'm looking forward to talking about more books at the end of October. Bye for now.